Hello, I'm Amy Jenkins. Welcome to this latest Reader's Advisory Grab Bag brought to you by staff of the Prince George's County Memorial Library System. Once again, my name's Amy Jenkins. I work at the Upper Marlboro Branch and I am a mystery reader. And up next we have...
I can go. My name is Kelsey Hughes and I work at the South Bowie Library, and I tend to be kind of a scattershot reader. Mostly what I like is any books that are kind of weird or kind of quirky or have something unique about them and then have a lot of character development. So that tends to be the two things that draw me. So it kind of crosses genre as long as it has those two features.
Hi, I'm Mary Keatsman. I'm currently at the Largo Kettering Library in Surratts-Clinton while it's being renovated. And I like reading romances and teen books mostly.
I'm Audrey Lau. I'm stationed at the County Correctional Center, and I am moonlighting right now during curbside at the Marlboro Library. I tend to read, like Kelsey, I read just about everything and anything. If you recommend it, it sounds like a great story. I'm really in it for the story. And that can be nonfiction and fiction. So I tend to lean towards the literary fiction, the classics, history, but I also have been going on this science fiction fantasy bender for the last few years. So, but I do read really broadly. And most of all that is in adult, young adult, and middle grade fiction. So I kind of do a lot of this stuff too.
It's really great to hear that everybody's got such a diverse perspective and has unique insights that they can bring to this conversation. I know part of Reader's Advisory is also getting information from other people, so I'm kind of happy to be hearing what you're talking about and adding that to my discuss on reading lists that I'll never get through everything, but I'm always looking for a new idea, so that's pretty awesome. So one of the things we're going to talk about, and we can't hide from, is COVID and the pandemic and quarantining. And so how was that for you guys?
Well, I will go first and say once I stopped reading the CDC dashboard that Johns Hopkins put together, and every minute of the day, checking, I kind of calmed down and started reading. Most of April was really a mess. We read what we had, and that's really what I think the theme of a lot of quarantine reading was for me. Was here are my piles of books that I've been waiting to read. It's time to read them down. So
yeah, I think all of us on here, but I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think this is true, are book hoarders. And I tend to both have like piles and piles of unread books that I own, as well as then continue to check out books from the library that I never get to. So after kind of the initial like shock and processing of the way the world is totally different, like it was kind of a pleasant time to like actually feel like I was making some progress there, because I didn't have any way to bring new materials in. So I was only like getting them out. So that was it was kind of a relief. But then of course, as soon as we reopened for curbside, all the holds that I had put in before we closed arrived, and now I've kind of reset, but that's okay.
Kind of took a little bit of a different approach. I found myself initially needing, I wanted to do something to help create, or kind of a way to express myself. So I found myself drawn a lot to like coloring and things that I could let my mind kind of wander. So I took kind of a little bit of a mini hiatus from reading, other than also reading the CDC and getting all stressed about that, and then needing mindfulness and coloring again to kind of balance all the chaos and the craziness of the statistics of COVID.
Yeah, I found myself, I did have a lot of books checked out, fortunately. I was glad to have them at home since I had maybe 50 books checked out for the whole period. And plus then, besides reading them gradually, which some of them I haven't even read yet because they're due September 1st, so there's still 2 weeks left. But I read a lot, reread a lot of the books I own because those are favorites. And I thought, man, I need a favorite book. Even the library books, I'm like, man, what books can be stressful? Not a lot sometimes, but like, if you're stressed about life, a comforting book, one that you know is going to work out well for the characters, always helps too. So that was nice. And I also got to read several teen books that I have checked out. And mostly, I like to check out the teen books, and maybe I'll read them. Maybe they'll just hang at my house for the renewal time, and then I can take them back, think like, okay, done, bye. You know.
I've absorbed by osmosis the content of this title. Yeah, and the other thing that was interesting is I found that I became more of an ebook reader than I ever have before. I have kind of honestly avoided them. I think they're an awesome tool for so many, but for me, it's a cliche, but like I really do love the physical experience of holding a book. But I was kind of forced to reevaluate that as I started having other things I wanted to read or needed to read that I couldn't physically access. And I found that while I still prefer physical books, like I can get through an ebook pretty okay, and like it's not the worst thing ever. So that was a good eye-opening experience for me, and I think I'm more open-minded in that way now.
Yeah, I would argue that probably mid-April, I just broke down and I was like, I'm going to try this because there's all these books I want to read, and the library was only purchasing them in an e-format. So I did. I mean, it was like if what changed my pandemic was Overdrive and Libby, and I didn't expect to be pulled in so fast, and it was so rewarding and so comforting. I was like, I can get this book now.
I'm so grateful that we had that for your resource available to us.
Yeah, I know.
Very desperately needed.
Yes, I definitely, I downloaded a book to listen to, and I did have 2 on my Kindle Paperwhite. But there's still nothing like turning a page versus a flick.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that kind of a thing. But it's a great resource to have because you can be remote and access it, which is great. They have a library system has a great variety of different titles that users can look at. So I think that's such a really cool resource. I know, Mary, you were going to talk about favorite quarantine. I kind of usurped you asking the question, but that's okay. I figure that I'm semi-hosting this, so let me go ahead and do that. So what are our favorite quarantine books? Did you have a book or 2 that you would like to share that was something that you enjoyed during quarantine? What do you think, Kelsey? Okay, go, Mary.
Yeah, one of my favorite authors is Mary Bellog, a historical romance writer, and her current series, these are books I own, by the way, and actually her latest one of them is coming out like this month, so I'm going to get my library copy, and I'll probably buy a copy later too. This series is the Westcott series, and the whole premise there's 6 of them now, I think I'm counting right, something anyway, and there's a novella, and the premise starts like the former Earl had been previously married. They only find this out when he's dead, and there's going to be the reading of the will. So they import this young lady, who's a 25-year-old or so in Bath. She's from an orphanage, and she turns out she's his legitimate daughter, and she inherits everything. So then the poor countess, who has been his wife, she is not a bigamous marriage does not count. And so then her children are illegitimate, and then they don't like this intruder who would love to share this stuff, would love to have her family and meet everybody. And it's a great series. The first one is called Someone to Love. Then it goes into her sisters. Actually, her would have been stepmother, Viola, gets her story. And there's a novella for one of the aunts. And it's just great. So that was one of my favorite series, because it's hard to have a favorite book. I just can't. Favorite movie, favorite book? No, there's too many out there. So that's one of my favorite reads. And I'm looking forward to the next one is the story of Jessica, who is, she's a kind of cousin of Anna and her sisters and brother. And so all the interrelated stories is great, because then you can have the main story, and then you get the other characters, and then they move along in their family, like they might add more children, they have adventures, then it focuses on the next one. And then the last of the books will be Harry, who is the ex Earl who got ousted. And so that his story, he's been in the war, and you don't know what he's feeling yet and which woman he will come to love, but it'll be a great story, I'm sure. So.
Oh, that's really cool.
Cool.
The kind of web it weaves.
Thanks for
Yeah, I think that's like
That's really-
romance is really all about the like intrigue of the hidden people in your family and the skeletons in the closet. And they're a lot of fun to read, I think. So,
Yeah.
What about
Who else had a favorite?
I can share mine. So basically, as soon as lockdown started in March, I was like, okay, what's the book I've been putting off the longest that I really wanted to read? And so for me, that was A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. Yes. So I bought it 2 years ago because so many people, like BuzzFeed articles have been recommending it to me. A customer recommended it to me. Like so many different places, people were like, you have to read this. And I wanted to read it, but it was so thick and the words are so small. I just couldn't bring myself to like sit and like, I couldn't lug it around anywhere because it's huge. So like, I kept putting it off. So I was finally like, all right, this is the moment you are going to read this book. It was so good. Oh my gosh. It's like, it's already one of my favorite books of all time. I love, like I said earlier, character development is like my thing. And this was really like 800 pages of learning and meeting and falling in love with this character over the course of his life. And really understanding like the trauma that he experiences and how he copes with it and how it affects his relationships and how he builds relationships and his friendships. And it's just like, it was so beautiful. I loved it so much. And honestly, I was putting it off so long because it was really long, but I got through it really quickly because I was just so hooked and I needed to know what happened next. So it's a tearjerker for sure. If you're someone who can cry while you read, you'll be crying a lot. But it's really, really beautiful. And I just really loved it so much.
Awesome.
I put it on my list because you read it. So I saw that and I thought, well, if Kelsey can read this book, I can read this book. It's huge. So I like delved into nonfiction and fiction quite a bit. And one of the things that I liked about a lot of the books that I noticed, I was reading a lot of memoirs and books about resiliency, like in people, Holocaust memoirs, French resistance. And one of the ones that I had checked out as an audiobook for my way to and from work was this book called Hymns of the Republic. And it was a story of the last year of the American Civil War. And as you know, I have a huge background in history. It's what my PhD is in. I love it. And the Civil War is my thing. So I guess I wasn't expecting it. We're in quarantine. I'm thinking, okay, Civil War book. And usually they all start with that little itty bitty intro about how we didn't expect the war to go on for so long. Bull Run, nobody was experienced. This book drops you flat down in the middle of year 4 when total war is happening. Sherman is marching to the sea. People are dying. The battles are bloody. You have your African-American soldiers coming into the fight. I mean, it really becomes this war for freedom. And I'm reading this all as we're starting to see Confederate monuments being torn down. And it was really, I almost wanted to say to all of my friends who are kind of like, I don't understand, read this book, because it's the last year. And the last year was hard war. And the people who fought and died and the women who came to the battlefield to help the sick and the dying, I mean, it was just really brought a lot of the why to the forefront. And so it was really not expected. I didn't expect a book that would be so, something I'm just interested in, to be so helpful to understanding what was going on as we were watching it on the news. So that was my kind of favorite moment because it got me to get back into my dissertation, start editing some friends' papers. And I felt like it really kind of spurred some energy into my pandemic that I hadn't had before. So
That's cool. Well, I kind of had 2 different things. Like everybody else, I kind of picked up something on one of my bookcases at home. So I read one of the Nancy Drew books. My mom handed me her series and when she was growing up. And so I said, I really enjoy those as a child. So I picked one of those up. It gave me comfort. Something that I've read, something that had a cliffhanger at the end, which I really like when I'm reading a story. And the other thing that I ended up reading, which I've talked about in a different Reader's Advisory capacity, was Clive Cussler's Celtic Empire. Is a book my mom got at the bookstore or at the grocery store, and she was having book deprivation and she needed something. And so she grabbed this at the store, and I never read Clive Cussler before. But one of the things I think that appeals about him is the fact that it gave me an opportunity to escape from the craziness of what was going on. So he has an adventure, and it takes you around the globe. And this one was set in Ireland. But so there's a travel element when we couldn't travel anywhere. It is something that was fast-paced, something with an adventure, and it features a character called Dirk Pitt, and he and his son, Dirk Pitt Jr., da-dum-dum, and Summer, his daughter, have these adventures, and they work for this agency that deals with research and with water. And it does have some local setting with Washington, D.C., but it's very fast paced. It's enjoyable, and it offers, like I said, an opportunity to escape. And there's a ton of books, so if you really like it, you can just launch yourself into one of those in the series.
And Amy, you said that was your first Cussler?
Yes.
Did you like it?
That was the first. I loved it, actually, which is embarrassing to admit, but public, yes, I'm sharing with you, is that I started binging on Clive Cussler. And what I didn't realize is that I think with that one series, he has like 20 some books in that one series. And then there's like 4 or 5 other miniseries that spins off of it. So now I've taken a Clive Cussler break, because I think I've read at least 10, and now I need something a little bit different. But
Well,
we'll be discussing that.
I'm doing a reading
later.
challenge where I have to read a book from a series that has more than 20 books in it. So perhaps I too will pick up a
Ooh.
Clive Cussler in order to achieve that prompt, because it sounds very enjoyable.
There you go. It is. It's very, very enjoyable. Light, fast paced. So if you like the thriller, it's right up your alley.
Well, and Amy, I returned to Nancy Drew. I had never read her, but my nieces were reading her over quarantine. So I decided to do some audiobook action with Nancy Drew, and I found her really old. like it was, but it was comforting in that there were no cell phones. There was no, I did like it, maybe because I'm a little bit older, but I did really like some of the characters and things that I had heard. Her boyfriend hasn't shown up yet, so I'm on book like 7 or something. But
well, I guess that's the difference between the old Nancy Drew, and they have several modernized versions of Nancy Drew. But I can't get into those because my mind already has the old Nancy Drew and what the setting was and the time frame in which it was set. So I can't have a Nancy Drew with a cell phone texting or anything like that. That's just too weird.
Yeah, it seems weird to me too.
So,
should we talk about other classics that we've been getting into?
Yes.
It seems like we've all kind of done that. So Amy, you mentioned Nancy Drew. Do you have any other classics you've been revisiting, or favorite books you've been revisiting?
I have a spin-off of a favorite book that I read. I found this interesting book called Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts. And I'm like, ghosts, okay, that's weird. I don't go into weird, but but my mom actually read this one, but I didn't pick it up based on her recommendation. It's like an adult version of The Westing Game. So if you ever read The Westing Game as a child, it's kind of like that. On the cover, it does say an adventure. So it features kind of a quirky character, Tuesday Mooney, and she gets hooked up in something that happens. She's kind of a loner. She does like a lot of research behind the scenes. And so this man named Vincent Price was a wealthy man, and he dies. And once upon he dies, then this mystery unravels and the game begins. And so I thought it was kind of a fascinating take on the Westing game. And so it delves into people's pasts and Tuesday's past. So I think it was a enjoyable read. So if you want to take a modern twist on a classic, I guess we can go with that one.
You know what's funny is I actually read the Westing game over like while we were quarantined because I had never read it before.
Oh, it's so good.
Yay!
I didn't.
Didn't like it.
I like the plot and I like the like concepts, but I really didn't like the writing style, and I found it very distracting because she uses a lot of like dot dot dot, or like she'll kind of jump from one thought to another, and I like couldn't. I was like, what? Like, where did this come from? Like, it was very abrupt, and so I could see myself really liking it as a child, but I think like with adult eyes, it was harder for me to enjoy. But I think I also checked out Tuesday Mooney because I was reading reviews and people were saying like, oh, this is like an adult version.
Yeah.
So I think I actually have it at my house because I was like, oh, I'll try that. Because I really liked the idea of it, and like trying to solve the puzzle was really fun.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I read the Westing game when I was little, and I didn't think it was jumpy at all, but I as a kid reading it, but like your review for the Tuesday Mooney, I think I have to get that because the Westing game, I still remember that, reading it. And also from the earlier conversation when I couldn't quite jump in, my grandmother used to read the Clive Cussler books, and now I think after your review, I think, man, I should read one.
Yeah.
And the
Excellent.
other thing, the Nancy Drew books, I remember that my other grandparents gave me one of the books for my birthday or Christmas sometimes, so I read a lot of those. Because yes, books in my family were a good Christmas gift, and my brother and I still often exchange Christmas gift books for each other.
That's nice.
Love that. I would say my revisit has, well, this is kind of cheating because it's a TV show, but now I want to reread the books. The Babysitter's Club TV show just came out on Netflix.
Yeah.
It's so good. It is not made for adults, and I really enjoyed it as an adult. Like, I really appreciated it's a very modern like take on it without feeling like too anachronistic, or I guess that's not the word, but like it doesn't have the Nancy Drew feel where it's like, this is not the thing I loved. It feels like, okay, they updated it, but I still see the threads that I loved as a child when I read it. I was obsessed with Babysitter's Club. I have the full, like all 150 books at my house. So I think I'm gonna have to go back to my parents' house and take those back with me to my house so I can revisit, because it just gave me so many like good feelings in like a very stressful time to like have that comforting, those comforting characters that I knew to see on screen.
I read Anne of the Island, one of the Anne of Green Gables books, because I had that one checked out, because like actually I saw there was a Marilla of Green Gables book out, like a update for her backstory. And Anne of Green Gables, those books I read first when I was 12, and I've read them as an adult also. And the third book is my favorite, Anne of the Island, where she goes to college. She has the love interest with Gilbert, although she doesn't like him like that. It's just, she's like, wants to be friends, but then when he cuts her off, she's like devastated. And she meets this other dude, Royal, and he's just like, she thinks he's her ideal mate. He's tall, dark, and handsome, but he's like dumb, whatever. And so then like, when he proposes, she's like, oh my God, I can't marry you. And her friend says, what, you were leading him on? You were teasing him? Are you kidding me? And I was like, no. She just had a moment of the heart. She couldn't do it, because of course she couldn't. He was not the guy. And then Gilbert, they graduate. Gilbert is sick. She is really like, oh my God, the man I love is dying. And it's like, then later when they meet up, Gilbert, it's total story spoiler, oh well. Gilbert's like, oh my God, when I heard that you hadn't married Royal, I totally got better. So it was happy ending, and that's just when they get married. Before they get married, and later books are not as good, but I mean, in my opinion, but the first three are the best.
Yeah, I love that series.
I was actually reading that series when I went for the interview for the job at the library, and my future boss commented on that because she saw it in my bag, and I credit Anne of Green Gables for me being chosen for that position.
That's awesome.
It's a great series. I totally went old school. I read Moby Dick, sorry, mirror writing, but I also read it with this book called Ahab's Rolling Sea. And most people don't touch Moby Dick. I mean, have any of you read it? Yeah, it's the book everyone like loves to hate. And you either love it or you hate it. A lot of people who hate it have never read it and they don't have any interest in reading it. I was kind of that person until I met my graduate school advisor, who is like the great Moby Dick proselytizer. So I have turned into the great Moby Dick proselytizer. Moby Dick can be read by every generation differently. And what's great is there's been a lot of themes in it that you can pick up on. Ahab and Moby Dick really aren't, to me, the best parts of the story. You have Ishmael, call me Ishmael, who goes out in November because he's bored and he doesn't want to start fights in the streets. So he gets on a ship with this international cast of characters, which for the 19th century, the book was written in 1851, is really fascinating. And to me, this time reading it around, focusing on really the natural history, Moby Dick is really a book about whaling and about what's in the ocean. And a lot of people don't get that because they've never opened it. You will learn everything you ever needed to know about a whale. It sounds awful, but it's actually pretty cool once you realize that Moby Dick is way more than just Ahab going after Moby Dick. But I enjoyed it the second time around because, like Amy said, it was a transport. Here you are in the South Seas, you know, you're doing something completely, and most people don't know the whales, they used all parts of them, and the oil from the lamps in 19th century America were almost all fueled by whale oil. So this is like an industry that was really important. But as you know, like it's been read as all kinds of different themes, and it's not just about revenge, it's about adventure. And this time around reading it, I really read it for like everyone else on the ship. Why were they there? And why would I, why did I want to get on this boat? Because this is the second time I've read this, and I enjoyed it even more the second time. There's just so much cool about this book, and I feel like it's one of those books I'm going to revisit over and over in my life. But I challenge you all to try it. It's such a slog, though. It's huge. It's like 500 some odd pages. It's old. But if you can take it with a grain of salt, in the sense that like there's a lot more there than you really think is there, I think there's a lot that you'll get out of it. So
it's the kind of book that I wish I could go back to school and be assigned to read, because I think, like you said, I would get so much more out of it if someone was like holding my hand through it, like that happened to me with Toni Morrison's Beloved. Like, I think it's an enjoyable book, but it's really complicated. And I had a teacher who just adored it, every piece of it, and knew it by heart, and like really made me love it because she was explaining to me all the things that I maybe didn't see on the surface or didn't think about the first time around or whatever. So yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, I wish I could just go take like a class just on that book so I can love it the way this person loves it.
There's an illustrated version I want to look at. It's like the whole of Moby Dick in illustrations. I mean, it's one of those books that artists have been inspired by, but I love the idea of this like kind of graphic novel.
That sounds
Moby Dick. So maybe you could get into that.
That's a good idea. I'll try that.
That sounds like an interesting format that I might pick up that, because it will present it in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I've been intrigued to see what happens with that.
And I would be willing to hold everyone's hand through it if you want, because I do think it's like I said, it's more than just an angry man who lost his leg and is chasing a whale. Like it's way more than that.
What I heard was from another Audrey in the library system that there was a Twitter thing about like quarantine Ishmael, where you read a chapter of the book a day, and I think you comment about it on Twitter. So I haven't done that yet. Now that 2 staff members have read it, I'm like, oh my God, maybe I need to read. Actually, I checked out the book, so it's huge. So I didn't, in little print, so I didn't start yet because I have lots of other library books, but I checked it out, so it's in my house now.
I think you'd probably get more out of it. And this is just a tip for everybody. Pick a format that you like of a book. Like Kelsey said, big books often have small print. So if you can get something that has a bigger print or even some pictures, like the illustrated, it really allows you to kind of enjoy the experience rather than say, it has small print, it's got a lot of pages, it takes your focus off of that a little bit.
Well, and when it has big print, you can flip the pages faster, so you feel like you're making progress more than you.
And the chapters are short, so it's not like, it's like 2 or 3 pages and you're on to the next chapter. So it's, you got that going. It's not so much of an investment every day. So.
That's good, because that might make it easier to take in bite-sized pieces.
Yeah.
Cool.
Amy, our grand leader, would you like to talk about what would you like to talk about next?
Okay, well, I'm trying to look at our list. We already did that one, favorite quarantine. Have you
You want
read
to
any?
talk about if we read anything new, anything that came out this year?
Ooh.
Yeah, yeah, because I'm reading multiple things. It's always multiple things going on. One of the ones I'm reading, it's called The Henna Artist by Ulka Joshi. It's labeled as a historical fiction. I'm in this traveling book club. I just joined it, and so we are visiting India this month,
That's awesome.
and they have Indian recipes and drinks, and we authors, and so this is an interesting book. I've only gotten, let's say, about 100 pages in, but it's about it's set in 1950 India. It's about a young lady who comes from a village, and she moves into Jaipur, and she gets paid extremely well to be a henna artist for some of the richer parts of society. And she's extraordinary because she doesn't just do the simple Mendi designs. You know, she presents special Mendi designs on women's feet for their husband to look at, and things of that nature. That is also contrasted with the introduction of a young girl from the rural village who I think is going to end up being a sister to this main character. Her name is Lashmi. So it's very rich and evocative of what the culture and the people are like during Jaipur during this time frame. So I am enjoying it so far. It's luscious, it's rich, and it just came out. The library just purchased it for February. And the one I just started last night, it's a nonfiction because I kind of like mystery and then learning and then mystery, just different things. The Lady's Handbook for Her Mysterious Illness.
I have that too. Haven't read it, but I have it.
It's very interesting of what they call. She calls it. She has a funny name for it. She named WOMI, WOMI, a woman with mystery illness. So it's not an official name. It's something that she decided to create herself. So she goes to doctors. She's having all of these different issues, and she comes from a family where her parents are doctors. And, initially they take everything that she says seriously, and they run a battery of tests, and they think, it's all in your head. There's nothing wrong. And, she says that, they've checked her body out very thoroughly, and that there are people, and especially women, who have a cluster of symptoms, and they don't know what the specific causes are. So it's sometimes sort of autoimmune issues, but it's just her delving into the experience of the process of being somebody from a wealthy background, but nobody believes what they said, like chronic fatigue syndrome or Lyme disease or irritable bowel syndrome or all these things, but there's a lot of doubt amongst medical staff and the public that these are quote unquote real medical issues. So she's trying to expose the light, to shine the light on people that these are real events, and that being tired, not sleeping well, having hormonal issues are real conditions that deserve to be looked at as you would say of a cancer or heart disease and a lot of those other things that are explored. And it's not it's not mental health issues or womanly issues. It's serious. So I just started it, and she just has a very thorough approach to it. So I kind of, if you like medical nonfiction, I think this would be right up your alley. And it adds mystery because it's a mysterious illness. So it kind of meshes the nonfiction love with mystery. So I hope, Kelsey, that when you get to this, that you like it as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to read it now that because I put it on hold before it was out because I read a review and was like, oh, this is great. But I didn't get it until we reopened. And when we reopened, I was like, I don't remember why I requested this, but it looks good.
Yeah.
So now you've made
I
me
just
excited
got it.
about it again.
Good. I just got I put it on hold too before Corona, and I just got it in. But I was like that. It had me with the title. The title had me. So it's like,
Yeah.
but I'm really enjoying it, and it seems like it's not one that you're gonna get stuck in and all the specific details. I think it kind of has more of a fast pace to it. But those are two things since, post-COVID, and that came out this year that I've been reading. How about you, Kelsey? Do you have anything you've been working on?
Well, one book that I read that came out this year is Weather by Jenny Offel. Came out in February. It was my first book by her. I know she has at least one before that people really enjoyed, and I'm finding that she hits exactly my interest level of kind of weird character development. So I definitely need to go back and read her other one now. But Weather is a very interesting examination of climate change and also truthfulness and this age of alternative facts, and how we and conspiracy theories and how we view the world through those lenses in the context of climate change. And the main character is a librarian, so I feel like I was kind of biased to enjoy it because she's kind of like a snarky librarian. So I really appreciate that. And it's a quick little read. It's not very long, and she writes in her paragraphs are small vignettes, and they're almost like scenes. It's not really a continuous narrative, which was I found I started it as an audiobook and it was too hard to follow that way. But when I switched to a physical book, I really enjoyed it and got a lot out of reading it in that way. And she has just these really funny, you don't notice it at first, but if you reread the paragraph, you're like, oh, that was actually kind of hilarious, but the joke was very subtle. So I really appreciated it, and I'm definitely gonna have to go back and read her other books now because it was very good.
One of the things I read was Big Summer by Jennifer Weiner, and I was on the wait list for a while for that because it came out, I think, this summer. And I started reading her last year with her biography, Hungry Heart. That led me to read all her novels. And actually I reread one of them because it was so good. And this one, Big Summer, is about, the character's name is Daphne. She's in her mid-20s. And actually I thought about, just a small criticism, I thought she sounded older than a mid-20s person, but maybe she's just extra mature for what she went through, who knows. But she's had a hard experience. She's kind of overweight, and her weight has been a problem. Not really for her, but for other people. Even her grandmother wanted her to go on a special extra diet as a 6-year-old when she had to stay with her one summer. And now this year, her kind of that word, the not your BFF, but your opposite of that. It's
Your frenemy?
Frenemy. Yeah, her frenemy, Drew, who's really rich and privileged and also about as mean girl as you can get. But she was in her orbit, and she liked to be in her orbit, but she also knew she would hurt her because it was that kind of thing. But she's getting married, and she invites Daphne along to the wedding in the Hamptons with all the rich people and all the expenses. It's kind of a whole thing. And since Daphne is a kind of influencer, and she's been just hired to model some clothes for this person, and she puts it on her blog, her Instagram account, whatever. And there's much drama because even in the story, in the blurb, you hear that something happens to Drew. She's dead. She's found dead, so the wedding doesn't happen. And so Daphne investigates it, and it's very good. She might even be a suspect. And there's extra characters. It's all sorts of fun, and it works out well, and it's very nice. She's a good writer. I highly recommend her books.
I'm going to add this to my TBR as soon as we end this. Sounds really fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
I have two. The first one, I'm just to be very brief. I really wanted to read this book. Lawrence writes the end of October. It's about a plague that happens. It's flu-like, if this sounds familiar. What I didn't like about it was I really was anticipating this book, and I read it in light of what we've been experiencing, and I was really disappointed because I think the things that were supposed to be scary weren't scary. I did think that their national response to a pandemic was a lot better than ours. But overall, I was just really disappointed, and I think it had to do with the fact that we just lived through this, and I was like, this isn't scary. I want it to be scary. But there's a Fauci character who's a CDC guy who runs through the book, who I really identify with Fauci. So I think that, you know, if you want a pandemic book right now, if you can handle it, I would say go. But like I said, I was looking forward to it and I was kind of disappointed, but that just came out in April or May. And then the other one I read was a young adult called All the Stars and Teeth by Adeline Grace. And I would highly recommend this book, even though I hated the main character from the very beginning because she's kind of very full of herself. Like she's very confident, I guess is what you would say. But it's going to be, I think, probably at least a 2 or 3 parter. It's on a ship. She's got magic. It's called Soul Magic. Her name is Amora. She's supposed to be the High Animancer. And while she's doing the demonstration for her kingdom to prove that she can do this soul magic, it goes horribly bad. She ends up kind of being banished. So she finds this kind of pirate type guy, gets on a magical boat, and so our journey begins. And you learn more about the kingdom and everything. It's a little violent. Soul magic involves a lot of blood, teeth, literally legitimate teeth. But it was my first young adult audiobook on the online platform. So it was very rewarding to get it because everyone kept talking about it. The second book comes out in February. So maybe we'll be under quarantine again. I don't know, but put this one on your list. I really, really enjoyed it. I can't speak, but like I said, by the end of the book, that confidence, all the things she was confident about, all the things that she knew in her heart, like I am the next queen kind of thing, everything changes. And it was like a really great way to end the book. So you know that second one coming is really going to be good. So if you like young adult, if you like fantasy, it's really good.
That's really cool. That's something I should put on my list. Speaking of which, I know in the beginning that we introduced ourselves at about what genres we like, but what if we flip it now and we talk about what our major weaknesses are? So to be honest, honesty is great. So I'm going to start off and just say that what I don't know a lot about is fantasy and science fiction. So I have 2 books that I'm going to try that were recommended. The first one is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. So this is what it looks like. So as they said in the back, it's like a Grimm's fairy tale except fresh. And so this person loves her valley home in a quiet village, but the corrupted wood stands on the border full of malevolent power, and its shadow lies over her life. Her people rely on cold-driven wizard known only as the dragon to keep the wood's dark forces at bay, but he demands a terrible price for his assistance. Every 10 years, one woman must be handed over to serve him without question. So this was recommended to me, and so I was like, okay, I'm going to try this because you need to embrace your weaknesses to become strong. And then the other one I found on social media, it's supposed to be similar to Harry Potter, but it's called something like Harvey. It's like is it Harvey Devlin, or it's another H name, but it's along the lines of Harry Potter. So I figured I'd start with the fantasy first to get into the fantasy bit, and then stick my baby toe into science fiction because that's even harder for me to understand. So I figured just with the fantasy first, and so I have these 2 as my targets. So that's what my area of weakness is.
Amy, I would highly recommend Binti if you haven't read her. It's a novella, so it's really short. Nnedi Okorafor, she's won a ton of prizes, but that one's a short one, and that's kind of like that African-American science fiction fantasy crew that's really, I mean, those voices, but that's a really good one, and it's really recent. If you haven't caught the reader's advisory that Monica and a bunch of other people did from this system it was amazing. I got so many reviews. I'm reading Monica's Senlin Ascends. It's amazing so far. He loses his wife at the Tower of Babel. highly recommend, but take it slow. And the other thing I would recommend is hard science fiction, which is more science-based. That's a little bit easier for people to delve into because it's science that's actually like either it's possible or it's, you know, we already have the technology, so it's not so hard to kind of imagine in your head, because that's where I think a lot of people get lost. I know I did. So
well, thanks for those points. I'll keep that in mind, and I'll keep you informed as how I go along. And if you see me smiling or screaming, it's going to be interesting. So who wants to go next?
Well, I've read both science fiction and fantasy, more the teen ones, which I would recommend over adult ones because they're usually shorter, and they usually, well, to me, a lot of teen books are better, like, or that works more, there's always hope at the end. But I can't really read teen sci-fi now almost because they're always a trilogy. I just can't. However, I am reading one set now because I was totally brought into it, was the Children of Blood and Bone and Children of Virtue and Vengeance by Adeyemi. And I read them kind of like, because my coworkers are reading them. The first one, I read it in February, but I checked out the second one for over the break, and I did read it, and it was like I read them like in like a day or two because they were so good and they're very compelling. And it's like the whole story, and it's like at the end of the second one, you're like, oh my God, I have to read the third one because you have to know what happens next. So those I highly recommend. And the genre that I don't read, which I'm not looking forward to because I'm on a reading challenge, is horror. I don't like horror. I don't like any of that. I don't like scary. I don't like psychological thrillers. They might be a little better, but horror, no. But the reading challenge for another month is like read a indie press horror books. I'm going to have to find one.
Rust Maidens. I can't remember the author, but it's called Rust Maidens. It takes place in like a futuristic, like kind of Detroit, where the women in the town are turning to rust. And it's horror, but I found it like not, I'm with you in that, but I found it, I got to the end.
I'm jotting that down because I'm doing the same challenge as Mary, and I have the same problem.
Me too. I'm in that too. Yes.
What's the second word? Is it what? How do you say
Maidens. Maidens. Rust Maidens. Yes.
Okay.
And I think the copy that is still at Marlboro, if I'm not mistaken. So it should be on
as
the
of
shelf.
This recording.
Yes. No one else get it until Mary gets it. I will just mention that challenge, the Book Riot challenge that we kind of turned into the staff reading challenge, has been really good for me. My weakness is that I tend to read white men. And I, over the last few years, have really been challenging myself to read more women, more people of color, people who hold opinions different than mine. So I ran into two books I really enjoyed. Djeli Clark is the name. He writes novellas. And the book that I really love that I picked out kind of as part of the Book Riot is the Black God's Drums. And I'm also challenging myself to read more books by Ndidi Okorafor. She has this book called Broken Spaces, Outer Places, which is more science fiction, I know. Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. So I'm really trying to get my, broaden my not just in terms of people, but place. So I didn't know there was a place called Oceana before Book Riot did the challenge. So I'm really trying to, native writers, native authors, really trying to get more perspectives in my life and just, because sometimes I think that when we read books, we tend to start talking to people, different people. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really the great thing about reading is that if you're scared to talk to people, it's people that don't look like you or act like you, books can be your beginning, and then you can just kind of go from there. So that's where my weakness is, and that's kind of how I try to fill it.
Yeah, I've been the past, I would say 5 years, I've been doing the Pop Sugar reading challenge, which is more fun than the Read Harder challenge. And then the past 2 years, I've incorporated the Read Harder challenge as well. So I do 2 book challenges every year. I never actually finish them, but they always push me.
You have to finish the staff one this year.
This year I will finish it. That is my goal. I'm going to try to finish both. But they do both really push me to read. I've read much more widely, both in terms of just like genre and topic and subject, and also like in author diversity, which I really think has been to my benefit. And I found a lot of stuff that I may not have considered ever reading before, but I really, really loved and enjoyed. So it's really opened my perspective. I will say the thing that the biggest gap that I have that I need to work on is like the bestseller authors, honestly. When I was in like high school and college, I had a rule that I would not read a book if an author's name was bigger than the title, which ended up really limiting me. And I realize now the error of that rule, even though it's kind of funny, like it ended up holding me back from reading a lot of good books and having a wider perspective in that way. So I have since eliminated that rule, but I also then need to go back and read like a John Grisham, a James Patterson, Clive Cussler. Like I just have missed all those books, and I feel like it's important for me to at least read one by all those authors so I understand why people love them so much, because they are so popular, and that's for a reason, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So
they're also comforting, you know.
Yeah.
You're used to a writing style, and I'm the same way. I don't like bestsellers. In fact, if it's popular, I'm gonna put it off to the side because I'm like, you know, I mean, there is that sense of like common reading, which is good, you know. I think we all have our copy of How to Be Anti-Racist, and I think that one is worth it, you know. And I think that there are some that I think are worth it, but I really do. John Grisham, I try. But they all seem to be the same.
I think that sometimes that's what makes people like them, is because it gives them comfort. You know, it's the same sort of plot, slightly, maybe sometimes the same character. But I think it's kind of good to get a smattering of what's going on, especially for like the heavy hitters, you know, Patterson and Grissom, and some of those. You don't have to be necessarily huge fans, but you know,
I totally agree.
Understanding what, you know, why customers are saying. Or you could say, if you like Patterson, have you tried XYZ?
And I will say, breaking myself free of that very obnoxious and elitist rule that I used to have already led me to read and love Leanne Moriarty, because she was kind of one that I put in that box of like, all right, well, she's like a bestseller, like it's probably not that great, but she's so smart and funny, and her books are very well crafted to have that like suspense, and they do make you think about deeper things sometimes. Like they're very enjoyable. And so I already am I have already seen the error of my ways in real time. So I know that it was wrong. I know I can overcome this, and I know that I will have some great reading experiences now that I've opened my mind a little bit more.
I also need to work on my romance, which I feel like Mary could really help us with that, because that's definitely one when it says the challenge is like, read a romance, and I'm like, you know. But I started reading, what is it? The Bromance Book Club. I don't know if you've heard of this one. It was popular, and I thought, okay, I'm gonna try it. I actually enjoyed it. So I mean, I think too that it helps to have friends that like things, especially your coworkers who are like really big into things. It helps.
Along those lines. Oh, go ahead.
About the bestsellers. Well, I used to read Danielle Steele, like as a teenager. She was great. I think I read 20 of her books, then I had to stop, but I did read those. And like, I think I read 2 John Grishams over the years. I think some of them, like, I had an adult like literature class in grad school, and I think I read one for that. I think I read The Firm, and saw how it was a little bit different from the movie, but I read that one. That was really good. And then I think I read a James Patterson, Along Came a Spider, for a reading assignment, like for Reader's Advisory. And it's like, I don't like knowing what the killer is thinking. Please do not tell me what the killer is thinking.
But you see, that's what I love. No. See, that's where I love. I'm like this.
No, I don't want to know the killer. And I used to read J.D. Robb's books, a lot of the death ones, and they had a little section of the killer each time. It's like, no, get me back to Dallas and her partner, whoever. It's like, no, Roark. It's like, get me out of this. The mind of the killer. I don't want to know those things. That's the scary books I don't like. And I forget, what was our other question? Because I didn't get to chime in yet. I think it was it was the reading challenge. Yes. Partly I read a lot of reading challenge books because I had them checked out early. Like in January when we started, I checked out many of them. So I still had them in March when we closed. So I think I read like 7 of them that I had checked out with me. And like the others have said, it's broadened my reading. One of the ones I read earlier in the year was a biography of somebody of a different faith. So I read the book by Ibtihaj Muhammad, about who is the Muslim Olympian in the fencing. And it was just like, that was fascinating. And she had a hard time because she was the minority and they did not treat her at all like they treated the other ones. They were totally elitist, even how they competed in the Olympics. Like, oh, I had no idea. That was really good. And I read one of the ones, it was like read an Indigenous person's kind of book. So I read a fiction, but it was called Indian No More, but it was based on the author's true story. They were taken off the reservation. They were no longer an Indian tribe. And it was like, they told them, well, of course, we're still the same people. We're just living somewhere else. We still have the same traditions. You're not, it's not, quote, Indian no more. You're not, you're still there. And it was just like, that was a big eye opener. And she had kind of like diverse friends on her block, but then the white people still treated them badly. It's like, oh, of course, oh, darn, whatever. Wasn't sure how that would go, but it was like LA in the 50s. And so some of the other ones, I would not have read those books. I was trying to like expand my children's reading since working more like in a generalist branch where we help like children's questions, adult and teens. So I hadn't read a lot of children's books over the years. So I read some also like some climate change children's books, which were very helpful too.
And one thing that's interesting about our group is that all of us work at generalist branches. Looking at us, and of course Audrey, quasi-generalist right now versus law specialist.
Right.
But it's interesting because we work in generalist branches that I think it's the fun thing is you do have to be versed in a lot of different areas. So I think that brings a unique perspective to doing readers advisory, since we have to be knowledgeable in all the different areas. So, well, this has been such a great discussion. Does anybody have anything parting that they
I
would
want to
like?
know what everyone's reading now and what they're going to read.
Okay.
So I'll start since I posed it, so you can all think. So I'm reading, as I said, Senlin Ascends. And the two books that I'm going to be reading next, In the Shadow of Statues by Mitch Landrieu, who is the mayor of New Orleans. He very popularly about 2 years ago tore down 4 Confederate statues. And as I said, this is like a big thing, especially as a historian of the American South. And I'm really looking forward to reading these perspectives because we're seeing a lot of this on the news. The other thing I'm looking at, again, more monuments, a book called The Washington Monument. It was really tall. And I checked it out right when we got back. So just to learn more about my hometown, well, not really my hometown, but my new hometown. Since I've been here for about 5 years, I feel like I need to start exploring the city because no one's visiting. No one's coming to visit. And so we're stuck here. And I figure we need to explore our community a little bit more. So I'm trying to learn a little bit more about local stuff that I can go see on the weekends. So.
Well, I'll go next. Oh,
I'm between books right now because I didn't I just finished one, but I wanted to mention, I read the book Slay by Brittney Morris. I'd forgotten, I thought I wanted to include that. It was such a good book. She's the creator, she's a teen creator of a game, and it was just a great book. I had heard it like mentioned on a lot of book things, like read this book. So I got it out when we were open again, and it was great. And there are lots of drama. It works out well, but like one of the characters, especially, like I was surprised, like, oh my God, really? It was good. So I'm just glad to talk about that. And my next book, I feel like I should read some of the other teen books I have checked out, because right now I have lots of books checked out because I was so excited when we went back to the library. I checked out lots and lots of books. So I'm not exactly sure which one is next, but I'll be starting another book later today, so because I read a lot.
You'll let us know.
Yeah.
So I'm going to cheat a little bit too, because there's one book I wanted to mention that I didn't get to yet, and it's The Only Plane in the Sky by Garrett Graff. So I actually really focused on reading a lot of nonfiction the past couple of months, which I don't usually do. I love memoirs, but I don't tend to veer into other sections of nonfiction. And this is an oral history of 9/11, as the subheading indicates, but it truly is like straight oral history. Like there's very little narration in between, and it's just more than 200 people telling their experiences of the day, either being in the building or losing someone they loved, or being a first responder, or being a politician making decisions. It's really, really fascinating. And what I really liked about this one is I listen to a lot of podcasts. I'm a big podcast lover. And I listened to the audiobook of this, and it really just felt like a very long podcast in the best possible way, because it was so many people. Some of them were original recordings of folks like from the oral history interviews that were conducted. And then they also got a bunch of actors to convey other people so that it really felt like it was 200 different people telling you their story in a really authentic way. And it was just truly like just such a moving experience. And for me, like I was a child when this happened, so I didn't have the same like memories of it that
I was
folks
gonna
who were
ask.
adults. For me, it didn't really like connect how tragic it was until I was like in college. Like I was like, oh, this was sad, but in college it was like, oh my God, like that happened. So this like really hit it home for me too, in a certain way. And it's just, one of the reasons too, I think it's awesome is because there's so many people now who were not born during that time or were even younger than me. And really this connects it. This makes it real in a really shocking way. So highly recommend that one, especially the audiobook.
I was wondering if it had a trigger warning, because I think for a lot of people who were evacuated that day, myself included, like I have stayed away from it. So I was just kind of wondering.
It is very real. It is very, very brutally honest. So if that's something that would be triggering for you, definitely be conscious of that. Take it slow. But yeah, it was just so powerful. But what I'm reading right now is Burning Down the House. I don't remember the author's name. Let me grab it. Tim Moore. So it's an exploration of punk music during the time of East Germany, like when the Berlin Wall was up, and exploring how like people in East Germany used punk as a way to kind of like push back against the restrictions. And then I haven't gotten this far yet, but the person who recommended it to me told me about how like after the wall came down, how they still had some conflict and clashes with like capitalism when East Germany was like integrated back into Germany. And so it kind of explores two sides of this like pushing back against different government regimes and how like punk music as a culture helped bring people together. So it's really fascinating so far. And a lot of the characters, or it's true, so I guess characters is the wrong word, but people they're following are teens or like young adults. So I really enjoy stuff like that because it's cool to see like young people using their power and using their voice. So yeah.
That's really cool. I have one more title to share. It's called The Adventurer's Son. It's a memoir. It's a story that's sort of like Into the Wild. So it's an outdoor literature kind of story. And it's about the pre-dawn of July 2014. A 27-year-old named Cody Dial. He is the son of a preeminent Alaskan scientist and Nat Geo explorer. He walked in Corcovado National Park in a rainforest in Costa Rica, and which is full of miners, poachers, and drug smugglers, and he didn't return. So this is the father's investigation into, what has happened to his son. So an adventurer finding his son's story. So they say it's part mystery, part memoir, and an unforgettable story of love and profound loss.
That's on my list, so I will be anxious to hear how you like it. So.
Yes, I like these travel. What was that? Cheryl Strayed that wrote? Oh, what is that one? They made it
Wild.
Wild. Yeah, kind of like stories along that lines. So this maybe because I don't hike and I want to live vicariously through them, through the hiker.
I don't know that you're going to want to hike after this.
Only if it's a simple trail. And as long as we have a stack of books, I'm okay. I got 100 feet. Fine. I'll plop down in my tent and read. But that's, yeah. Hey.
Glamping.
Glamping.
You just sit down at the beginning of the trail with your book and say, all right, just come back when you're done. I'll drive us home.
Exactly. I'll be the keeper of the spot. That sort of thing. But, this has been such a great discussion with everybody. It's great to hear everybody's different opinions and likes and dislikes. And hopefully those people who are viewing will be able to glean something from this that they might be interested in. And I know that we will probably have another Reader's Advisory grab bag at some point in the future. So for the public, stay tuned. And so for this group, stay tuned. We're going to see what we come up with.
I think we need
next.
like a part 2, how to prepare for the pandemic. Just the event that we have that phase 2, like types of books you should have in your home at all times.
That there's an idea. There's an exact idea.
Too many post-apocalyptic books.
Oh boy. Oh boy.
All right.
So what I'm going to do is right now is I'm just going to conclude our discussion and thank you everybody for participating today, and thank you viewers who are watching this video, and we will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.